Hey everyone, this is my first bit of JTO content I've ever made, and what's a better way to start than with a review of Ring 1. In this review, I'll be going over my opinions on the lobby, towers, and the overall feel of the area. Most of the focus will be related to the towers since they're what make it an area great. So let's get to it. Starting off with the lobby, this lobby is simple but has a ton of charm. This is usually the first thing a player sees when they first enter this game, and I would say it makes a solid first impression. You have the tower straight ahead to get you started, and you have the other areas as well in a neat little hub room to get you where you need to go. While this lobby is incredibly simple, it is also very charming at the same time. This lobby personally brings me back a ton of nostalgia due to my experience with this game back in 2018. I first played this game back when it was Kitty's Tower of Hell in 2018, back when it was in the description of Tower of Hell. I remember doing the first 3 towers, and I never beat Tower of Heck because I wasn't skilled enough at the time, and promptly gave up after that. So while I technically played this game in 2018, I don't consider myself a veteran or anything because I never made it that far. What got me into playing it again was that in late 2020, I decided I was finally going to push myself to beat the Tower of Killjoys. A few months before that, around in October or September, I did TOA and TOM again, but never really did anything past that. However, in December, I was determined to finally beat Tower of Killjoys and actually start progressing in the game. I spent about 2 weeks trying to beat that tower and finally did it on January 2nd, 2021. And this is where my life went down the drain for the next 5 months because I got addicted to this game. I'll go more in depth on this later since this is meant to be a review of the lobby, but I really want to go in depth on why I started playing this game and how I got into it in the first place. So back to the lobby. It's simple and not the most complex thing in the world, but it gets its job done effectively and efficiently. I'll give a solid 6 out of 10. So let's get to reviewing every tower in Ring 1, excluding Thanos Tower because I have not yet completed an SC.
So I have gotten to Floyd of Title, so I'm getting pretty close.
Let's start obviously with the tower a majority of people start with, Tower of Annoyingly Simple Trials. This tower is fine. It's a really short tutorial that goes over the game's basic mechanics, and it does fine with that. Each floor introduces something crucial that will be in the game's later towers, and its short length keeps it from getting too long for newer players, and it allows newer players a good way to get their first tower completed. There isn't a lot to talk about with this tower because of how short and basic it is, so for its score, I'll give it a solid 5 out of 10. It's an average tutorial with nothing all that special about it. Next up, we have the Tower of Anger. I think this tower gets a bad rap. It's a pretty enjoyable, easy tower for how early on it was built in the game's history, and it gets far too much hate as, quote, a walking simulator than it deserves. The gameplay is simple and incredibly basic, but I've always gotten some enjoyment out of this tower despite its flaws. It's far from the greatest tower in the world, but I think people hate it a little too much. I'll give this a solid 5 out of 10 along with Toast. However, this streak of really average towers ends with our first piece of shit. I'm just gonna be blunt here, this tower fucking sucks. It was very clearly rushed and it shows hard. The gameplay is repetitive and just uninteresting. There's so much spam on this tower that it hurts. This is one of the first towers to just spam gameplay all over the place and it just isn't fun. You have some decent sections like floor 6, but the rest is just awful. We obviously can't forget about floor 5. This is one of the laziest and dumbest floors in the entire game. If you're a new player and aren't good at head hitters yet, well tough luck, because you gotta walk around the entire floor for like 10 minutes. This tower is just lazy and not fun at all to play. Easily the worst tower in Ring 1 and I give it a 2 out of 10. However, to make up for this lazy mess, how about we move on to the original tower to be built. Time for the original tower, and the tower that stopped me from being able to call myself a JTO veteran because it was just too hard for little 11-year-old me. For the first tower, this is pretty solid. It's nothing amazing, but for what it is, it's good. The gameplay is sort of spammy in sections, but it's never to the extent of Tower of Madness, but it also gets an excuse as the first tower to be built. I don't think Tower of Madness deserves it after being built after one of the best towers in the entire ring. This tower has some fun sections on it, and it's also pretty creative for being the first tower. While it has its fair share of traps, they're never completely unfair bullshit. This is overall a fun romp that kicked off this game with a good start. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. However, next up we had one of the quote newest towers in Ring 1 and one of my all-time favorites. The tower that kicked off my descent into madness and to J-tardism. This tower means a lot to me and is one of my most nostalgic towers for me to play. The tightropes on floor 3 still haunt me to this day, since at the time I didn't know how to do tightropes and would just try and jump all over them and would get my legs split like 70% of the time. This tower was a massive difficulty spike from Tower of Madness. Keep in mind, for newer players, this tower was considered easier than Tower Effect on the difficulty chart. This was a completely unfair spike for newer players looking to get into J-To. I literally spent 2 weeks trying to beat it. While the second half is way easier than the first half is tough for a new player, and it turned a lot of people off from playing this game. However, on its own, this is a great tower. The gameplay is fun, it's creative, and has a lot of inventive concepts you wouldn't expect in a Ring 1 tower. This tower to me gets a solid 7.5 out of 10. This is also the first tower where I think the soundtrack is really good as well. All the music fit the floors in question, there's some real bangers on here. I didn't really go into the soundtrack on the last floor because there's nothing special, but in conclusion, this is a really good tower that I think gets a bad rap because of how early on in the game it was. Next up, let's move on to the first difficult tower most people do. Alright, welcome to the best but also one of the most forgettable towers in Ring 1. This tower is pretty good as a whole. For Ring 1, the gameplay is really strong and the design is good. Until the last 2 floors. This tower really falls off a cliff with floor 9 and 10. These floors are so boring and basically have mega fun obby gameplay. But for the first 8 floors, you have a solid tower with some good design for Ring 1 standards, with some pretty inventive gameplay. The soundtrack is solid, but it's really nothing that special. I don't really have much to say about this tower other than that it's good. I'll slide with a 7 out of 10 and leave it at that. However, next up, we have a tower that I have a lot of nostalgia for. Tower of Stress. This tower was my first big grind in J-To. I spent 3.5 weeks trying to beat this thing, and I know it inside and out. This tower will forever be challenging in my heart despite being moved down to difficult. Objectively, this is not the greatest tower, but oh my god, it is so charming. The music, the colors, and the soundtrack all just flow so well and make for a really memorable tower. Out of all the towers so far, this one has my favorite soundtrack. Floors 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10 all slap so hard. The worst song in it, without a doubt, is Floor 6 though. The old Floor 6 music was so bad it was funny, but the new one just doesn't have that charm to it. When it comes to this tower, Floor 7 haunted me, and that floor is absolutely not difficult and definitely falls under challenging. The long jumps on this floor are pretty long and require some lining up, which for a new player can be tough. This tower, like I said, from an objective standpoint, isn't amazing, but god, I just love it so much because of my experience with it. I gotta give it a 7.5 out of 10. A more objective score would probably be a 4 or a 5, but I'm an incredibly biased person and I'll give it a high score if I want to. Sadly, we must end our streak of good towers with the next tower on this list. Alright, now we gotta get back to bad towers. It was nice while it lasted. This tower is not good. It's full of traps and just boring and repetitive gameplay. I'm aware it was the second tower ever built, but I can't cut it the same slack as Tower of Heck. This tower's gameplay is just not fun and there's no other way around it. This is up there as one of the most forgettable towers in Ring 1. It doesn't have anything that great or special about it at all. Floor 9 is completely inexcusable, and those thin studs wraps are awful, and some of the worst gameplay in Ring 1. I'm aware you can skip most of Floor 9, but doing it legit is just awful. I'll give this tower a 3 out of 10. It's not great. Tower of Rage. One of the most hated towers in Ring 1. Now where do I fall in this tower? I fucking love it. This is one of my favorite towers in Ring 1, and I have no clue why. The soundtrack is perfect. Every song fits the floor it's on, and it's my favorite soundtrack in Ring 1. One thing most people don't love about this tower is spinner gameplay, but I actually do somewhat enjoy spinner gameplay. This tower and TOAV are among my favorites, because I just find spinners fun to do most of the time. Obviously this tower has one of the stupidest floors in the entire game with floor 10, but outside of that, I just have a blast whenever I play this tower. It's created for Ring 1, it's fun, and just overall fun time. Also, this tower is intense difficulty, and is infinitely harder than TOIE. It's not even really that close. Overall, for being one of the most hated towers in the entire game, I obviously think this tower is way too overhated and a fun time overall. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Let's hope the next tower can keep up the quality. This is arguably the best tower in Ring 1. For being the third tower ever made, the quality just shoots through the roof from Tower of Heck and Tower of Screen Punching. You have solid design, good gameplay, and just a really good color scheme. I don't even know how they made a tower this good so early on. It's creative, it's fun, and oh my god, it is just so great. This is probably my favorite tower in Ring 1, because it just gets everything right. The soundtrack is a banger, and almost every floor does something unique and different. But by today's standards, this tower is probably mid-high challenging, but I think it should stay intense due to being the first intense ever built. Obviously, floor 9 is stupid and floor 10 is completely free, but I think everything else in this tower is fun and really well put together. I'll give it a 9 out of 10. Good stuff. Another one of my favorites. This tower focuses on one thing: wraparounds. This tower, for being the first rim ever built, is really strong. The difficulty is good, the gameplay is fun, with a lot of creative wraps for the time, and is a great baseline for the remorseless difficulty. I believe the hardest floors in this tower are 4, 6, and 9. Floor 4 and 6 are like the bottom of rim, and floor 9 is such a massive difficulty spike. You can't talk about this tower without discussing the funny stick out on floor 9. That wrap is so awkward, and because of that gap, you can't wrap it super tight, and you have to hit that stud at a perfect angle. This wrap is probably around insane difficulty, and is a massive hurdle for anyone trying to defeat this tower. The rest of the tower is fun, has inventive wrap time, and is just overall a fun tower. The soundtrack is more funny than it is good, using mostly stock Kevin McLeod music, but it's charming and floor 9 slaps, so I'll give it a pass. I'll give this tower an 8 out of 10. Fun tower right here. The first Citadel. I don't go crazy for this tower like other people do, and if I'm being honest, I think it's good, but it's not the best thing in Ring 1. The gameplay is solid and it has some fun creative bits to it, but oh my god, this tower has so much filler and just flat out not fun sections that drag it down significantly for me. The first floor 4s are so boring and lame, and you have some real stinkers like 4, 11, and 12, plus the dropper. However, when this tower gets good, it's really the best stuff in Ring 1. Floor 14 is a blast and significantly fun and creative for Ring 1. This tower also has a really good soundtrack that gives off that epic feel of a Citadel. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. It's good, but it's not the masterpiece that people say it is. Overall, Ring 1 is one of my favorite areas in J2. It is definitely better than anything else pre-Ring 4, and it's just overall a fun time for new players in my eyes. So in my opinion, I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. This ring has its bad towers, but most of the towers here are honestly pretty good, and I think people hate on this ring too much. Here's a ranking of the towers right here on the screen. Hopefully for my first bit of J2 content, this was good. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and please subscribe for more J2 content in the future. Oh, you thought I was done? No way, bro. I still got really neat! Obviously, this tower is full of incredible gameplay, insane creativity, and amazing design that can't be missed. This tower deserves a 10, no, 11, no, 12 out of 10. This is the greatest tower in the whole game, as you can see by this amazing design. This tower cannot be missed by a single soul. Okay, video is actually over now. Bye!